Well, Washington lawmakers wrapped up the legislative session about 8 o'clock last night, just hours before that midnight deadline. Even though this was a short session, it was historic, with the House and Senate passing the so-called millionaires tax. It would tax households about 10% on any income over $1 million a year. Now, we've heard from dozens of viewers worried the so-called millionaires tax will eventually be expanded into a broader income tax. Governor Bob Ferguson told us yesterday that that will not happen.
In the legislation, it's actually capped. That's actually in the legislation. And each year goes up by the amount of inflation.
So Republicans say if Governor Ferguson signs the tax into law, they will challenge it in court, arguing it violates the state constitution's ban on a state income tax. Former State Senator Reuven Carlisle is here with us to look at this session. Thanks for being with us all session long.
Of course.
We're going to start with the millionaires tax, historic, arguably the biggest bill that we've seen come out in decades. There are still a couple of hurdles, though, right?
There are. Well, as you just said, the Republicans are going to question it and appeal it to the courts. It'll make it all the way to the state Supreme Court, without question. And, you know, interestingly, 5 of the 9 state Supreme Court positions are now effectively open. And so there's going to be a real change in the court. So we don't actually know 100% of how they'll rule on the constitutionality of it.
In which way they might lean. So 2 hurdles indeed.
Yeah, well, the second hurdle, of course, could be an initiative to repeal it. And so if you get an initiative to repeal after the court rules, then you could have it face the voters. But it'd be one of those situations where sort of no means yes and yes means no. So it could be a little confusing for the voter.
So a ways to go.
Yeah.
There's also concern that this could impact jobs in the state, right? Businesses, jobs. So what's your take on the overall outcome, on how it might impact the economy?
Yeah, there isn't any data, of course, but of course, anecdotally, we see Howard Schultz made an announcement. We see some jobs moving from Starbucks to Tennessee. Jeff Bezos left a few years ago. So there's just sort of this growing momentum, this sense that there's impact on the economy. Mayor Katie Wilson made some comments at downtown Seattle about the impact on the real estate market. So this overall conversation is very real about what is the economic impact. We're the global headquarters of Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, Boeing, Costco, really premier companies in the world. Are the entrepreneurs of tomorrow going to be here in Washington State or not? And that really is sort of the core economic question.
And it's a big one.
It's a big one. And of course, we can't know for a while, but the implications are really serious.
And the governor said there's no way this is going to be expanded into a broader tax, but there's still a lot of concern about that. Do you think it's a promise the state can keep beyond Ferguson?
Well, I don't, because for the simple reason that there's nothing that you can do outside of a constitutional amendment that would prohibit a future legislature from lowering that threshold below $1 million. So he can make that claim, but a legislature next year, the year, or whatever, any time in the future, could lower that threshold from $1 million down lower. And of course, the polling's really clear. It says the public's pretty supportive of it if it's $1 million or more, but they're not supportive of it if it falls below that level. So that is the challenge. You can't bind future legislatures in that way.
And then finally, do you think that lawmakers accomplished all they wanted to this session? There were so many bills that were sort of on the table. Did they get done what they wanted to?
Yeah, Governor Ferguson said yesterday, and legislative leaders said that they really accomplished a vast majority of what they wanted to accomplish. I'm sure we'll talk again about some of the bills that passed, but most of the bills seem to be along the lines of what the agenda was from majority Democrats when they first started the short session.
What in your mind would have been the biggest win? Or potentially the biggest miss? Yeah,
you know, I think interestingly, there was a very strong bipartisan transportation budget, second year in a row. Senator Marco Lias, the chair of that committee, navigated that. And they put a lot of money into maintenance and operations. So with all the snowfall, you think about all the potholes statewide, all the bridges and roads. They also fully funded 3 of the ferries to move to hybrid ferries. And then, you know, a small win for one of my personal favorites, Treehouse, which does educational foster youth. They fully funded that program after cutting that last year.
Which is a big win for
a lot
of people.
It's a big win for foster kids.
It really, really is. Reuven Carlisle, it's been a pleasure to have you all
Thank
this
you.
Legislative session. We'll see you. The next one will be here before you know it.
It will.
I feel like they're always right around the corner.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.